Well, welcome back to KTN Sunday Night. This past week, the British government offered 2.6 billion shillings as compensation to 5,228 war veterans as an out-of-court settlement for the abuses that they suffered during the emergency period and the Mau Mau insurgency from October 1952 to December 1963. British Foreign Secretary William Hague made a statement to Parliament that left many questions unanswered, especially as to why they were offering compensation if they did not accept liability for the colonial horrors. Further, there are questions as to how exactly they arrived at that figure of 2.6 billion shillings, given that the exact number of claimants is 5,228, as I've mentioned. The payout per person is even less than 500,000 shillings. Listen now to the British Foreign Secretary.
We recognise that British personnel were called upon to serve in difficult and dangerous circumstances. Many members of the colonial service contributed to establishing the institutions that underpin Kenya today, and we acknowledge their contribution. However, I would like to make clear now, and for the first time on behalf of Her Majesty's government, that we understand the pain and grievance felt by those who were involved in the events of the emergency in Kenya. The British government recognises that Kenyans were subject to torture and other forms of ill treatment at the hands of the colonial administration. The British government sincerely regrets that these abuses took place and that they marred Kenya's progress towards independence.
Joining us now in studio, Professor Edward Kisiangani, who is in the middle. He's our resident political analyst. Moses Kuria, to my immediate right, a communications consultant, and to my far right, Benjamin Dolo, a activist. I think you all
political activist.
A political activist.
No, social activist.
A lot of things Benjamin is. It's always hard getting a title for him. Thank you all for joining us today. Prof, I'll begin with you. What did you think of that statement that was made in Parliament by the British Foreign Secretary?
I think the British Foreign Secretary is very clear that the British government and all the colonial authorities tried very hard to build Kenya. He's saying, we build your institutions. That is what he has indirectly said. So probably that is another way of saying we can't accept liability. You are looking at the bad side of us, but we also build your country. So the second thing that I read from that is that he wants to silence what he, in my opinion, he looks at as rent seekers and people probably who are not freedom fighters in the first sense. So he just wants to silence the noise, show that he has some concern about what is happening in Kenya, and he knows the things that are driving these people to ask for compensation and money, probably poverty levels. And then he says, okay, let me just say we can do an out-of-court settlement and then give you something to silence your voices, because he knows that even there is a question, and that's really what most people would be thinking. There's a question of who is a freedom fighter. Are these the people who fought for independence? Most of them are dead,
but not all of them, and built these institutions on the broken backs and blood of our own people.
Yeah, but remember, he's talking about Kenyans. He didn't talk about Mau Mau, because the fight, the struggle for freedom was...
He did talk about the Mau Mau, Professor.
When he spoke in that statement, he said, we know that very many Kenyans suffered torture. And then when he talks about Kenyans, it's not limited to Mau Mau. He again, in that statement, is recognizing there are more people involved in the struggle for independence than just the Mau Mau, because most of the Mau Mau are confined in a particular region. So this is probably why he's treating it with disgust, and maybe more freedom fighters, the genuine ones, will wake up from the graves and ask Hague to pay.
Benjamin, Professor has referred to the Mau Mau war veterans as rent seekers.
I think we ought to be careful, and this is a discussion pretty much on reparations, which can be a very slippery slope, because once you admit liability and you open that door, then where does it close? If you look at World War II and the internment of the Japanese, it was determined that certainly war crimes had been committed, abuses had been committed, liability was accepted, and reparations paid, but it does open again, the possibilities of never-ending legal action and what have you. Let's be very careful and let's point out that, yes, abuses did happen, but this was not the same thing as slave trade. As William Hague points out, if you look at the railway that we are using today in Kenya, if you look at the roads and the designs right from, for example, in Nairobi, the Arboretum area, some of the strong buildings that are still standing, the provisional administration that has been very helpful to, successive governments, whether for good or bad, the availability of DCs and what have you, which we're breaking away now. All of these institutions indeed were built by the British.
Are you saying the British should not pay compensation because they may have never-ending legal battles? And is that our problem at all?
I'm saying they should, but we must not confuse this for the same levels as slave trade. I mean, there was a struggle on both sides, and there was atrocities committed by both sides. As one of the British members of Parliament did acknowledge, there were members of the Mau Mau that were beheading, white settlers and what have you.
Especially, I can help you,
yes.
Dolo. If you look at what happened in Marichon, in Joro,
yes,
there were several atrocities committed where animals were maimed, and even Africans themselves who did not probably approve of Mau Mau were killed.
Correct.
So who is going to compensate?
Collaborators,
that? Yeah, so
called.
What he's saying is that if the British government also goes to court to say we want compensation, will the Kenya government do it? Or even if the citizens of Kenya now go to parliament, to court and say our people were killed by Mau Mau, who is going to compensate that?
Moses, should the British settlers who may have lost families here at that time be compensated?
Well, if you lose stolen goods, should you be compensated really? Because you lost stolen goods. I mean, British people are not here on a tourist expedition. They were here as colonialists. And it's important to note that the British Empire was built on the back of the colonies. If you look at the British economy, it has got no resources worth calling resources. The whole British Empire was built on resources stolen from the colonies. So I think we might be actually trivializing this issue. It is important that people get compensated so that they can have closure on a personal level. And I think there were 5,200 of them that were in that case. I understand now there are 8,000 others, including Dedan Kimathi's wife. Remember, this is an out-of-court settlement. And the British government actually begged that this matter be settled out of court. Why? Because Kenya is not the only country that the British government stole resources from through illegal occupation, through violence, through torture, through raping. Other countries, if this case had gone to the full length of trial, would have followed suit and asked for their pound of flesh. Remember, you're talking about from countries from the Caribbean
Moses,
to Tanzania.
Are you saying that Mau Mau brought independence?
It did, among others.
You have a very, very shallow historical perspective. By the time Mau Mau was being fought, there were nationalist forces who had denounced Mau Mau and who were fighting for independence. For example, if you look at Jomo Kenyatta himself, about several times he denounced Mau Mau. Daniel Arap Moi did the same. The people who really were given what you call the independence flag, the nationalist forces, had denounced Mau Mau. So this is not a very significant page in our history.
Professor, I don't understand. Are you trying to trivialize the role of Mau Mau?
No, we are not trivializing.
I mean, these matters, I don't know whether that's what you teach your students, but these matters are not mutually exclusive. You're going to have people like Jomo Kenyatta denounce Mau Mau purely as a strategic move of that particular time. People like Daniel Arap Moi did the same. So it is not that if one was bringing independence, it's at the expense of the other. Or the nationalist forces, and that includes people who are in the armed struggle, that is a Mau Mau, people who are in the political class, Kenya African Union, Mekatiriri Wamenza. Yeah, we have got.
But look at what the nationalist forces do after independence. If you really want to understand the significance of Mau Mau, here you are asking for compensation. But look, how significant were they in this republic? When Jomo Kenyatta takes over, he actually orders the army to silence the generals in Mount Kenya who had refused to surrender. So there were even a problem to the African
and that's
government.
Why, Professor, that's why we've got to be very careful, and with, for example, when Moses says that they were stealing resources, once a colony had declared its interests, had put a system of government, Her Majesty's flag and what have you were there, you've got to be
without the consent of Kenyans.
Consent is one thing. It's like a declaration of war, for example. If you look at the Iraq war, a convention, by definition, the definition of a convention, we're not saying it's right, but we're looking at the protocols.
But you're saying it's okay that they could come and plunder.
I'm not saying it's okay. I'm
and
just
should
saying,
not have to pay for
and
it.
what I'm making is a very complex point. I'm making a very complex point.
The question is not how much, how much they should pay yet. The question is whether or not you agree that they built their country on the back of our resources.
If you follow Moses' line of argument, you will very easily arrive at the point where an academic intellectual will make the argument that after the colonialists left, we were then recolonized by the same colonialists, except that they were black in this instance. And then you will find people that will come out, 2,000 of them or 30 of them or whatever, and they will go on a very strong legal basis to seek compensation from the Jomo Kenyatta government and the successive governments. That's the kind of pattern that is very easily opened when you set a precedent such as this. I'm just urging
and I suppose the question also begs, I want to turn to what you were talking about, Professor, just a little earlier on, that perhaps the Mau Mau did not, and I've read this, so I'm just welcoming your views, the Mau Mau did not get recognition here at home because some of those independence forces that you're talking about, nationalist forces, were associated with the Home Guards.
That is true, but even when you use the term home guard, I don't know what that means. Everybody had
you don't know what that means?
You know, because it's a very controversial term, Anne. Whichever way.
Well, let me be less controversial. I am referring to the locals who worked in cahoots with the British forces during the time of collaboration. That's what I'm talking about.
If you look at the strategy for gaining independence, there are those who collaborated as a way of telling the British, let us come and talk and you leave our country in a peaceful way. But there was also another group which was collaborating and saying, we cannot associate with you unless you leave. If you don't leave, we use force. Whichever way you look at it, the end is the same. Whether you collaborated or you did, everybody wanted independence. So it's not this what I'm saying is, you know, Moses will not understand this. What I'm saying is that there's a problem. This Mau Mau script has been overplayed. And it has been overplayed to the point that even after 50 years of independence, some people use this script to have a false sense of entitlement to resources and power. We don't want that kind of thing to go. And now, if they go, they are doing that in Britain. They are likely to come here and start asking questions. You didn't support us during the struggle for independence. You don't deserve power. And we are the ones who deserve power. You know, at independence, they even asked to join the army and form the army, and they wanted to be given its free uniform. Kenyatta denied that.
Two things, and one, during the trial in the UK, I understand one of the Mau Mau veterans was asked by the lawyer for the British government whether he was tortured by the British soldiers or by the so-called Kenyan collaborators. And I think a very old man, almost 90 years old, told the court that, look, the guys who tortured me, whether they were black or white, they had the crown of the British Empire, and that's all that matters. Two, this narrative, and why I like this particular case, some people like Professor here have always tried to show that the issue of Mau Mau was between this group of Kenyans with that group of Kenyans, this group of Africans with that group of Africans. I think the correct narrative has come out, that this is an issue between Africans and the British. And the British have to actually start cultivating some long-term, how we are going to live together with the British people. You know, it's actually an egg on their face. And I think it's a realization, an awakening that their history, the historical past of colonialism has to be reopened. And it's not just going to be in Kenya. It's going to be done in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Ghana, in Indonesia, in India, in all those countries that the British Empire was built.
You understand that the British colonized what is now known as the United States of America.
Yes, and everything will be fair.
And when the British left, they committed, there were a lot of crimes they are committed on both sides. When the British left the United States, what is the United States now, in 1783, what happened is that those people went back and started building the United States, the citizens of what we call modern America, and forgot about this story of compensation. So if this case had gone on in the court, British court, up to the extreme end, the rational end of the case, the Mau Mau would have lost the case.
So
because first of all, the lawyers would have raised the question of who are you compensating?
Then why did the British opt for compensation if they were sure that they were to lose?
Why did they surrender?
It is
because this is an important point, Moses. I think it's important that we give a little credit to the goodwill. And you could revert the question and ask, what really could Kenya do if Britain declined? Britain is one of the G7 nations in the world whose economy perhaps is 1,000 times the economy of Kenya. You understand? So in diplomatic, parlance, you have indulgence and mutual respect, really. So I watched the debate on the floor in the British House of Commons, and a lot of members of Parliament were remorseful, expressed regret. I think that is good. I think that is positive, and I think credit is due.
But by not admitting liability, is it a real apology? And I don't remember hearing the words "I am sorry."
Yes, the
words "I'm sorry" were there. I'm sorry, Professor.
No, they were not, Benjamin.
Not admitting liability is...
He expressed regret. I know he used that word, but he did not. Ultimately, he did not admit liability for what happened. And said, in fact, British taxpayers now should not be liable for crimes that happened in the 20th century.
To not admit liability, as you know, and is basically...
And one member of Parliament, I beg your pardon, Benjamin, I've just remembered that one member of Parliament actually went ahead to ask, this is a curious, outcome. You're not admitting liability on the one hand, yet you're offering compensation on the other.
Anne, that is exactly what I started by saying. I said that this guy said, the British Foreign Secretary said, colonial authorities build a lot of institutions in Kenya. What he's saying indirectly, and that is a diplomatic language to say that, if we looked at the compensation level, colonialism was positive. It helped Kenya to be what it is now.
In some ways.
Do you agree with what you've just said? Colonialism was positive?
In some ways.
In a lot of ways.
I'd qualify it
in some ways.
In a lot of ways. We are still using the English language. They have left institutions. We keep on crying that we don't want the British. We are even when we ask for compensation, we ask in their own language. We are doing that.
And you're in a suit and tie as opposed to a skin.
Yes, which is there. So they changed this country.
I've been lobbying to come in an African dress
this country in a big way, and the people here don't want to accept that. They want to pretend.
I cannot believe you. I cannot believe that, Professor, you are holding brief for the British.
I'm not.
I mean, Chinese were not colonized by the British, were they? So they still have suits, and they still have 3 meals a day. And by the way, they are even more developed than us here. I think the sun will still be rising from the east and setting in the west, whether the British colonized us or not.
You don't understand my point.
What's the major thing?
It's about dominance and influence.
My point is that if you are going to compensate anybody, you must compensate everybody who said no to British rule. But when you talk about Mau Mau, everybody knows the domain and the range of the struggle for independence in this country. And then this guy is referring to Kenyans. Mau Mau is not Kenyans. Mau Mau is one section of Kenyans. So they don't even represent all Kenyans.
Are you for real?
Can we talk about the greedy MPs? Because I think this is never
today we're about colonialism. So we'll be back to them, I'm sure.
Listen. So the whole thing, because according to the professor, Mau Mau are a section of Kenya, then the whole narrative of colonial justification is lost in that. And I think that is our problem as a country.
What I'm saying
that the narrative changes according to who is
this narrative of Mau Mau, there are people that I really respect who are part of the struggle. I don't even see their names being mentioned.
But they didn't go to court. Some people went to court.
No, you cannot. There is an old man from Nyandarua called Kiori Njoka. He lost his hand. I met him personally. He's not part of this team. And then when
Professor, this is a legal process. I understand where you're coming from, and I think we earlier in this bulletin had a story about, the eastern region wanting to be part of the compensation. But as Moses has said, do you not see the sense that this was a legal process and that one must have moved to court?
And other people have gone to court. They have followed
and that this is the result.
And then it is
called due process.
The significance of the whole matter is that it's being settled out of court. Why? Moses, you must say that.
No,
why?
No, because the British know that if this matter goes to full trial and they lose, which they would, no, they will lose. The British government will lose. And if they lose, all countries that were colonized by British will follow suit and use that matter as a precedent to claim compensation.
The British judicial system.
That will corrupt the British government.
The British judicial system cannot rule against itself. You don't even see this common sense. Do you think they were going to rule against the British government? I've told them, okay, give them this little money. If they don't take it, then we overrule them.
Are you insinuating that the British judicial system is not independent, is not free, is not fair?
But the judicial system is based on tradition. It's protecting British interests.
So it has got nothing to do with the rule of law.
Gentlemen, let me move it forward. A question arose as to the timing of the compensation. Do you find it at all peculiar?
The timing...
Given our ties with Britain that have been rosier.
Oh, certainly. I think there's a lot of intrigues, for lack of a better word, going on. There's parallels, if you look at it carefully, with recent events, the president's visit there, the threats by the British and other Western, capitals, based on the ICC cases. So again, the never-ending saga and the ghost that just refuses to go away.
Politics by Britain on their part, do you think, Benjamin?
A little bit, certainly. And what is for sure is that the British, in this particular instance, in its dealings with Kenya, and given that about 65 to 68% of foreign investment, direct foreign investment, if you look at all these different companies, indeed are British. The British, unlike the Americans, are not really sure how to deal going forward. Certainly they're not.
I think this is the one.
They're changing positions and many things are going on. So yes, there's question marks and it's curious.
Anne is asking a very important question. What is the timing? The timing is this, Anne. Have a settlement out of court. This is what the British are doing. They want to recruit the Kenyan public to support British interests in this country, and by extension support Western interests in this country, because it is increasingly becoming untenable under the ICC, problem. We are being told that, two Kenyans or three Kenyans are going to the Hague. There is generalized bashing of Western activities in Africa. So what do? You take a section like this one, say we have accepted this, we are paying you, so we are yours. So it's trying to recruit the general public as opposed to politicians to see the British as people who have a good heart, they have a kind heart, and that can help them win back the confidence that the public here in Kenya and generally in Africa will have about the British.
Gentlemen, we must wind up, and if you could all very briefly just give us your final comments. And I want to start with you, Moses. How do we get over this colonial hangover that it seems that we have? On the one hand, some people say, colonialism was good for us. I'm seeing tweets here saying that colonialism is overrated. Look at Ethiopia. They're still making it. How do we get over it? How do we get over it and move forward?
I think, and I want to differ with the Professor about the timing of this particular issue, because over the last few years, the British foreign policy towards Kenya has been a mixture of hysteria and desperados. They are trying to clutch at the straws, and they try this, it doesn't work. They harp on something else, it doesn't work. They tried to interfere with the past election. They had a clear candidate in that particular election. They tried to interfere with the vote tallying process at Bomas, something that I alluded to in my own affidavit in court. So I think I really do sympathize with the position of the British government, but I think they need to treat Kenya as a partner, and it is them actually who need to change the narrative from a colonial subject to a partner. If they can be able to transition in terms of their mentality by seeing Kenya as an equal and as an ally that they need in this region, it is not us to change from our colonial. We are very clear, we don't like colonialism. Most Kenyans,
other than Prof and Benji.
Other than Professor, who is going to come over it. But I think Kenyans don't
really we have to wind up.
How we just overcome colonialism is to do things right here. It is a shame for us to be talking about British torture when after independence so many Kenyans were tortured in the jail and were in jail. So do things right and forget about the British. Let them do what they want, but for us we must do things right here.
Benjamin,
let's be careful not to stigmatize and demonize and incite our people here. Cooperation and partnerships are really the way forward. Some of these countries enjoy immense wealth, skills, resources. I think it's a big mistake to try to alienate the international, community by selling false propaganda or false patriotism.
Gentlemen, your views always very welcome, and your time most certainly. Moses Kuria to my immediate right, Professor Edward Kisiangani in the middle, and Benji Ndolo. Asanteni sana. We take a short break, continue the conversation online on Twitter. The hashtag is Checkpoint. I'll be back with the sports next.